now father of a 10-month-old boy.
Oh,
Um,
lovely.
I have 4 years as of January 2nd of sobriety. So my sobriety date is January 2nd of 2019.
Beautiful.
And
Beautiful.
uh, that is the day that I entered rehab in Steamboat Springs, Colorado for alcohol. I don't think that any form of addiction is better or worse or different. I consider some people like to say that they're a recovering alcoholic, which I do say that, but I also say that I'm an addict because I don't think there's a difference between a drug addiction or a heroin addiction and an alcohol addiction, except for the choice of use of substance
Yeah.
and maybe the time that you use it and how it goes about the actual practical
Yeah.
effects of that. But the same issues happen, the same problems occur, the same stories are there,
Yeah.
um, and that is something that so nobody's, in my opinion, addiction is the drug of choice or addiction of choice is no diff. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. No, I can believe that.
Some people choose to see it another way, and that's to them. I don't begrudge anybody.
Yeah.
So I'm 39 and been married for 6 years now, 7 years, and I'm an attorney by practice or by trade, and a politician, and now I'm a policy government relations officer for a company. Um, and addiction, alcoholism is the family business. My sister is in recovery. My mother drank herself to death,
Hmm.
and my father he ended up falling down the stairs one morning, um, don't early in the morning, and uh, had a brain bleed. Can't attribute that to alcohol, but he was an active alcoholic at the time. Uh,
Yeah.
he had gotten sober recently, because my sister was pregnant with her first child, and so he was attempting to go sober. So we don't know, and
What? Yeah.
ultimately it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Um, my mother did commit suicide by alcohol, um, just because she, after 10 years after my dad died, she couldn't
Couldn't.
deal with
Yeah.
it anymore.
Yeah. The weight
Um,
of that grief. Yeah.
yeah, and my timeline is not much different than many people. In high school, growing up, I had a very loving and wonderful family. Growing up, two parents who stayed married until death did them part. All loved each other very much. Obviously, there's trouble, no matter in any marriage, and
Yeah.
they were probably high functioning alcoholics. And so I learned a little bit about that family business there. My dad's mom was also an alcoholic. I've come to find out, and so it's been that history there.
Yeah.
Um, I went to had a, like I said, a wonderful loving childhood growing up, but alcohol was always present in the
Present.
household.
Yeah.
I really wasn't a big drinker in high school, more of a marijuana user, recreational marijuana. Um, Nothing like crazy
Yeah.
or anything like that. Just what high school kids in suburban Detroit do. Um, and so you can think about it as a lower to middle class upbringing.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, marijuana is there. It's what
Marijuana's there.
didn't get in any trouble. Ultimately went to Marquette University in Milwaukee, where I learned to drink, and had a pretty good academic career with some bumps in the road at the beginning, but graduated in 4.5 years of a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and then moved to Chicago and continued partying and drinking. In Chicago, for people in their young 20s, is a definitely a party
Yeah.
scene. The bars are open until 5 a.m. on weekends and
Yeah.
2 a.m. on weeknights, and they encourage you to stay
Yeah.
out late. And so Milwaukee to Chicago, and then I went to law school in Boston. So
Oh, we up the
um,
ante.
yeah, yeah, it was, a lot of heavily alcoholic cities.
Yeah.
Um, and I had a lot of fun, and I was one of those guys who was always able to keep pace or outdrink my friends, and drink. I would drink 4 or 5 nights a week out at the bars, but I was able to work well and have good jobs and go to law school and make friends and have relationships. Met my wife in Boston, and we traveled eventually to. She grew up in Colorado, and eventually I followed her out to Colorado, and we live in the mountains of Colorado now.
Very nice.
And so we got settled up here. Um, some people might in this area might know my name because my wife started her own law firm. I got involved in that as a criminal defense attorney and a civil litigator. And then I was tagged by the Democratic Party to run for public office out here. I've always been engaged in politics and problem solving. And in
Yeah.
2016, 2017, there was kind of an upsetness in the country. And I thought maybe I could do some good.
Do something. Yeah.
And I ran for state house in western Colorado in a very Republican area. And had a wonderful time doing it, but I was an active alcoholic during that campaign.
Yeah.
Didn't show up to any events drunk or do anything politically drunk or anything like that. But there would always be liquor afterwards.
Maybe drinks there. Yeah.
Yeah, not a big overall deal or a huge problem. After that election, I did get a DUI when I went back to visit my mother in Michigan, and she was in and out of the hospital for her own alcoholism at that time. And so after that DUI, I was put on what they call pretrial services, which is like kind of like a probationary period.
Yeah.
While the case is going on. And during that time, I tried to remain sober. And I found myself, for some periods of time, I was able to. Some days I couldn't.
Not as easy. Yeah.
And it just wasn't easy to do. And I was lying to my wife, lying to myself. And then on New Year's Day of 2019, so New Year's Eve 2018, went out to a friend's house and I didn't drink. And then New Year's Day of 2019, I promised my wife I wouldn't drink, and I wasn't able to. She went snowshoeing, and by the time she got back, I was drunk. But at some point in that time frame, on that day, I made a phone call. And I had been as a criminal defense attorney. I'd worked with some alcoholics and some probation officers and people in the community that I live in. And I was able to reach out to somebody in a small town out here at a treatment center. And that treatment center wasn't right for me, but they made a phone call.
Yeah.
And that phone call that they made, that person called me back, and I actually answered the phone. And when I answered that phone, they took my history, they took my information, they took my insurance information, and they got me a bed the next day to an inpatient center. And my wife drove me 4.5 hours the next day and dropped me off and then picked me up 28 days later.
Wow.
And it was the best experience of my life.
Yeah, you could tell.
And I still tear up when I think about that. It was the hardest drive I've ever done.
I can imagine, yeah.
I didn't know if she would be there 28 days later.
28 days, yeah.
She knew she would. And all of my friends that I went in with that were my friends remained.
Yeah.
Didn't lose anybody that I maybe a few drinking people,
Right.
but they weren't really friends so
They
much.
weren't there to begin with. Yeah.
Yep. And so I've been luckily through AA and hard work and everything like that sober ever since. And since then, I have turned a leaf in my practice, and as a lawyer, I became an addiction attorney, as I called it. I would only represent clients who I talked to about their addictions and
Yeah.
had addiction crimes, DUIs, multiple DUIs, failures to appear
Because of that. Yeah.
because of that, or multiple drug tests that were positive because of addiction. And I was able to assess different levels of people who wanted to get help and tried to help them. Um, I figured my political career was over because of the stigma.
Yeah.
Um, and luckily for me, it wasn't. I was able to actually in 2018, or
Yeah.
2020, I should say, um, with the help of a therapist and my wife and my friends, decide to run for that same state house seat again. And leaning into
That
my
addiction.
the
Yeah.
addiction and making it public.
Yeah.
My opponent, who ended up beating me in a very, once again, Republican district, is one of my best friends. And we
Wow.
worked on, he calls them behavioral health bills. I call them mental health bills and addiction treatment bills. And we worked on, he came to me the day after the election was over and said, "What do you want me to do in this realm? And I'll do it."
Yeah.
And so that was great. And
Yeah.
then some people reached out to me, and I was able to take that to a bigger platform, and ultimately running for a contentious seat in Congress and the Democratic platform. And that message got a little bit national
Yeah.
and some attention and helped some people. And so I had some feedback that some people got some help because of it. So I was able to try to take my message beyond that stigma.
Yeah.
And that told me a little bit that, and I received pushback like, oh, I can't have, even from diehard party members would refuse to vote for me because of my past. And I said that's fine.
That's fun.
Um, that's your choice. I know what I'm doing, and what I'm doing is right.
Yeah.
And I had one woman called me that after watching my ad that's entitled "This Is My Message." After watching that ad, he asked her to take him to rehab, and I still remain in contact with him today, and he's been sober
It's
since.
true.
So, and
That's
father of
beautiful.
four.
Beautiful.
So that's
So
kind of my story.
it's a great story, I think more than anything, I love the fact that it still hits you, and it just goes to show you that you're once you're on that path of recovery or healing or whatever you want to call it, like you're just on it, like, and that's okay that you never get off it, but it just goes to show you how meaningful it is just hearing you tell it. Um,
It is, and
well,
one thing that I've noticed over the past 2 years is how many television shows or have a character who is in. They don't even mention it prominently. They say I was in recovery,
yeah,
or say the words experience,
and
strength,
then
and hope.
yeah, and then
Um,
just gone.
but it has an impact on me, and I think
Yeah,
it's starting to make that. The more we can do that, the more that's built into public culture, pop culture like that, the better it is. The more politicians out there who show themselves as being not perfect. I mean, so many politicians have a DUI and have addiction struggles. They don't actually end up talking about it, and they hide behind
somebody
it.
somebody else talks about it for them and makes it sound like it's this terrible thing when in really
It's not.
it's not it, but it's terrible probably for them. Like they feel terrible about themselves, and
Yep.
they're probably working through that. And you just kind of slap them in the face with something that is, so traumatic, for somebody, and probably trying to still work through it,
It, it made sense for me. My mom died 4 months into my sobriety. So April of 2019 was when she died. 4 months into my sobriety. And I was in a program at the time called IOP, Intensive Outpatient Therapy. It's a step down from inpatient rehab, right? You
Right.
go to these different programs, and then there are some. I was lucky to have a very good intensive outpatient therapy program near my house, so I didn't need to go to sober living. I was able to live at home with my wife,
Home.
and which was great. Some people that's not possible, or it's not good for them.
Yeah,
Luckily, in my situation, it was.
it worked. Yeah.
It worked. My wife's father is also along this path, so there's a lot of help there.
Yeah.
But I elected to IOP at this program is 3 months long, and so I did a month in rehab, and I was just about to graduate from that program, quote
Yeah.
unquote. And I asked if I could stay for another year, for another month, just in case, just to
Just in
see what would
case.
happen.
Yeah.
And they said yes, but that's it because we can't be a crutch.
Sure. Yeah.
And I thought that was very respectful of them.
Absolutely. I mean, how many people are strong enough to tell somebody going through something like that, something that could potentially be like, well, wait a minute, you're not going to help me, but it's not. They really are helping you, but
Mhm.
at first, hearing that is like, oh, wait a minute, like I don't know how to swim just yet. I can keep myself afloat,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that because I didn't want to have to be a crutch there, or
Yeah.
have them as a crutch, because that's what alcohol was for me. It was a crutch to
It was a
allow me
crutch.
to do what I needed to do to handle emotions for so long.
Yeah.
And I needed sobriety to not be a crutch, but I needed it to be the tools that I had to stand on my own.
Yeah. As you go through doing the work and continue to put the message out there, looking back, like, were there things that you noticed, as you were in school and first started drinking, that, yeah, this is why? Because you said that you had, like, your parents were like high functioning, so you couldn't really
Yep.
tell, but does it make sense now as to why you were on that path, or is it like, nah, this was my own path all the time anyway?
I wasn't destined to it,
Yeah.
um, but it definitely makes complete sense that I learned some traits from my parents,
Yeah.
both good and bad. Um,
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
and in this instance, some coping mechanisms that weren't the greatest. And
Yeah.
what I did after rehab was then I went to a non-alcohol specialist. Like, it wasn't an alcohol therapist. It was somebody to help just get in touch with my depression and anxiety and the emotions, the underlying causes of my
Right. Because that's
of
definitely there at the same
what I
time,
yeah,
right?
yep.
Yeah.
So why I was self-treating, and that is where I really found out the root causes of some things, and that's one thing that I need to do. But I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't cleared the cobwebs,
Yeah.
and then also been working with my sponsor to do the steps to forgive myself for the wrongs that I had caused other people and for
Yeah.
those wrongs. And I not everybody has to go to AA to get sober. Not everybody
Yeah.
has to do a 12-step program. It's what I needed to do.
That's what,
I
right.
don't There's not one path, and I don't tell anybody to go down that path. One thing that I will say about AA, though, is that it's not necessarily, a lot of people think of it as a program to make amends to the outside world, and there is a portion of that, but
Sure. Yeah.
really what you're doing is you're forgiving yourself
Yeah.
for those wrongs that you caused to other people.
Yeah.
And if they don't want to accept your apology, that's on them.
That's on them. Yeah.
But you're figuring out a way to forgive yourself for the harm that you caused them, because you
Yeah.
carry that baggage much more than they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to that day that the phone rings and you pick it up now with a more clear head, what caused you to pick up that phone? And then fast forward, the time spent there, like you said, your wife knew that she was coming back in 28 days, but you
Yep.
didn't. What does that do for the mindset? Because you could see it go in two different
Mm.
directions. And it's like, well, here I am at a very low point, and I'm probably going to be even lower when I walk out of here because they're gone.
Yep.
Or, you could have some kind of hope. So talk to me about that.
My biggest fear while I was in there was losing her.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about the fear of catastrophizing.
Yeah.
And that is something that people call it going down the rabbit hole or something like
Yep.
that. And I think that that is something that alcoholics or addicts do very, very well.
Yeah.
And live in that catastrophized moment.
Yeah.
This will happen. Not this could happen, but this will happen. And so I had a lot of good support in that facility. Guys that I still talk to this day, 4 years later. Now, why I answered that phone call, I still don't know.
Still don't know.
Still don't know. I still don't know what caused me to pick up the phone that day and make that phone call. I do know the reason that I thought to make the phone call was because I told my wife I wouldn't drink and I couldn't not drink. But I don't know what was different about that time
That day.
than any other time that I told her I wasn't going to drink and couldn't not drink.
Interesting.
And I'm lucky enough I could walk to a liquor store where I live, so
Yeah.
that was fine. Didn't always do that, but that was fine. But the one thing I do is every January 1st I call those same 4 people.
Interesting.
I'm sure they're sick of me, but
I doubt it. I doubt that. I'm sure they see it just the same, that they're at least part of, because a lot of times, our nature is to want to fix, and, we kind of spit out just what we know. And sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not, but you're probably just helping them answer that it's like, I don't know what this is doing. This is, maybe they think it's silly, but it's like at some point they probably are sitting there going, this is doing something, to keep him on that path. And that's a great thing,
yeah, maybe it helps them the next day deal with the next person that calls
whatever.
them.
Yeah.
And if that's true, then that's great, because
Yeah.
I know if they weren't there, I wouldn't be here.
And that's what they're being reminded of. I mean, how often do people get that reminder? I think it goes both ways, that you're both getting something valuable from that.
Yeah. And so to finish my story, this is the bow that I will put on it. And I'll go, I am a grateful and fearful alcoholic, is what I say. I have a healthy fear of relapse.
Yeah.
There are people that can go back and have a drink or two and live the rest of their lives 1 or 2 beers. And then there are plenty of people who go back and have 1 or 2 drinks, and then that won't be enough, and then they'll be gone. Maybe they'll get back out of it again. I don't know if I'll be the first or the second type, and I don't see enough joy in the first type to try and risk the second type, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
And the day that my congressional campaign ended was April 5th of 2022. And it ended at 7 p.m. At 10:30 that morning, my son was born. So
interesting.
I retired from being a politician that day.
Yeah.
And so I would not be able to do it with him without the 4 years that I had before that.
I mean, I'm 2 years and added another 6-month-old to the mix there. So I can definitely attest to the feelings there, that it, especially, and I can imagine, going through, what you're going through and having that moment, and it's, I mean, whoever you want to believe in, whatever you want to say,
right.
It's affirming in some way, if you're paying attention, that here's your wake up call, here's your sign, here's your moment to really take stock and what what's going on in your life, whatever, wherever that is for you.
That's kind of the bow and how it's
Yeah.
worked out so well for me.
It's a,
And
it's a
I say that's the bow on it for now because I
life
don't,
keeps going.
life keeps going and I don't
Yeah.
pretend to have this or know what I'm doing. Right.
No.
And nor do I want to believe that
No.
I
Yeah.
do. Well,
Beautiful. Thank you, Colin. I appreciate it.
thank you for having me.